People are passionate about their Spider-Man movies. They know which ones they love, they know which ones they hate, and they know which ones disappointed them. But that also means it is fertile ground for some flaming hot takes. I asked for your Spider-Man hot takes, and you guys shared nearly 500 flaming hot takes. Today, I looked through all of yours, I picked the ones that I found the most provocative, and I'm going to react to them. Let's fight. I absolutely love Sony's universe. It reminds me of the 2000s Marvel era films, which I adore.
He's the best. Love it.
I love how all these spin-off movies are just basic stories that aren't trying to be Oscar-worthy movies like the MCU tries to do. Well, I wouldn't say that the MCU is trying to make Oscar movies. I don't know that that's the way I would phrase it, but I do understand what you're saying in terms of I appreciate some of these movies being just more straightforward. And you think even like, the Marvels last year, what I believe it's the second shortest MCU film. It's supposed to be a lighthearted film, a lot of humor to it, and it's still interplanetary, jumping from planet to planet, a post-apocalyptic things here, sacrifices, universes tearing apart. Like their simple short film that's supposed to be lighthearted still is epic in scale. And so there's something nice about, you watch Madam Web, and it's like one lady who doesn't really care much about people has to take care of 3 girls and keep them alive for the runtime of the film. Simple, straightforward. And I like some of that too. And that's like Black Adam. A lot of people dunked on it for feeling like it was a movie that should have come out 15 years ago. That's kind of what I liked about it. That's what worked for me. And I guess that's what I've learned to appreciate about the Venom movies. I would apply what you're saying to the Venom movies of when I first watched the first one, I was like, oh, this is messy. But with time, I've been like, I kind of dig this. It's a different type of comic book movie that is a little bit more basic. And that's okay. It's about the bromance. I think Morbius, something went wrong, but I think it could have been a good movie. Like, I think it's not actually that far off. I don't even know where things went off because the right ideas are in there, but something went very off in the execution. So it's a really bad movie. But to that point of like wanting more simpler stories, kind of throwback to 20 years ago, I think I kind of agree with you. And to the one we just talked about on these, that's kind of why I like the fact that Sony still has some input, so we do get some of these simple stories and not everything is part of this gigantic, convoluted, interplanetary, multiversal deal. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is incredibly overhated. The score and VFX are great. I think there's a lot of truth to this, where it's a movie that it was overstuffed. It's well documented that there was disagreements between the director, writer, studio. They crammed too much in when they filmed it, and then they reworked it in the editing room, and so it's kind of jarring, and it feels like some things kind of get abandoned and underdeveloped. There's a number of issues there that it's easy to forget. So much of it looks gorgeous. Like the Spider-Man stuff swinging through the city, it looks fantastic. But like you said, there's some very cool stuff with the score. I believe Hans Zimmer did it. Obviously, one of the best working. I've always been a big fan of the Peter Parker, Gwen Stacy relationship. There's a lot of stuff in there that the pieces, the parts are much better than the whole. And that goes back to the big issue with the film, which was they just put so many things in there that it like trying to cram it all in means you have to like cut away pieces at each of them so it doesn't wholly work as a whole, but you can be like, that was really cool. That was great. And there are defenders for the film. My very good friend, Griffin Schiller, Film Speak, that's his favorite Spider-Man film, and he will absolutely defend it and has made a video declaring it fantastic. Aunt May the movie, if it had a good idea, a good script, and they cast the right people, we could have seen something really unique in the Spider-Man universe.
It's true.
I mean, that's true, but I think that's a little bit of like cheating the statement, because in any scenario, if Well, you have a really good idea, a really great script, and a really great cast. Right, that's a great setup for a movie, but that's the definition of good idea, good script, good cast. That's the ingredients of a solid film. And the criticism of Aunt May the movie is like, you're taking a character that historically just does not have this fantastical background. Kind of the thing that kind of makes Aunt May, Uncle Ben interesting. The reason they flesh out Spider-Man is that he is the spectacular Spider-Man, amazing Spider-Man. He has this fantastical world that he's a part of as Spider-Man, but Peter Parker is part of a very normal family with normal family issues, and he's balancing those two things. So as soon as his anchor to normal is not actually normal, she's part of like espionage, thriller world, former spy, you break kind of what makes Spider-Man work. The juxtaposition of normal high schooler and superhero. As soon as everything is spy world, I think it gets less interesting. The splitting of two worlds, it's gone. But I mean, like, that's why I think like when you phrase it as, well, I mean, if they had a good idea, well, if they had a good script, well, if they had a good cast, but that's always true. That's the definition of good idea, good script, good, like that's literally the definition. And the problem is making Aunt May interesting and have this fantastical background is not a good idea because it breaks this piece of Spider-Man that's so important. It breaks that anchor to the real world. Next one, Cody Leach YT.
Who?
I don't know who this is, but they sound suspicious. The concept of building out a universe with villain and side character origin stories for Spider-Man to eventually come home to is a really good idea. Sony has just botched the execution on such an epic level that it just seems cynical and idiotic. If they were knocking these out of the park, we'd all be chomping at the bit for them to take Spider-Man back. Yeah, there's a sense in which I agree with you. I think there's something here that might have potentially worked. And two, even what we've kind of been talking about in here, like I think the idea of Madam Web, you make this thriller that's about someone that can see the future and carrying the burden of that, and what is the ethical responsibility. Like, there's something interesting in that. And you take some of these characters that don't get as much screen time, and you do smaller stories about them. It's this nice, like, complement to the bigger stories. I mean, classic example, Blade, not an A-list character. Like D-level comic book character, and then they made like a really interesting set of, well, two interesting films out of it, and a third one that I enjoy quite a bit. And Cody, I know you have fun with it, though it's not a good movie, but but like that's what these movies could have been. They could have been Blade, but unfortunately, that's not how this turned out. That's not how the execution worked. Most of them feel like there's just like producers like messing with everything instead of trusting creatives to tell an interesting story and find the unique thing with each character and play that out. You're just doing this messy thing that I don't think really works all that well. But I think there might have been a version to it. Like same with Morbius. He's maybe the better comparison to Blade for the obvious vampire reasons. But you think that could have been like this horror anti-hero in the, this Sony universe, but instead it's like this campy, goofy movie with Matt Smith dancing in a subway after killing cops. So something went off here. Tom Holland is the worst live-action Spider-Man. He's always in the shadow of other superheroes throughout his entire trilogy. It's not till the end of No Way Home where he feels like Spider-Man over Spider-Boy. I would pretty strongly disagree with this. Like, because of the deal that Marvel Studios and Sony arranged, it was a character share arrangement so that Spider-Man can appear in Civil War and 2 Avengers movies, and then Marvel Studios characters could then appear in the Spider-Man movies. And so then you have Tony Stark, Nick Fury, actually Talos, and Doctor Strange appearing in his trilogy of films. I don't think at all those characters overshadow Peter Parker. How much screen time does Tony Stark actually have in Homecoming? it's not very much. Like every 15 minutes he stops in for like a 1-minute scene. He's in the movie for like 10 minutes. The plot, the character arc, it's all about Peter Parker as this high schooler with Tony Stark, like, you know, checking in on him from time to time. But like it's not in any way an Iron Man movie. He is very much a side character. Likewise, Nick Fury is not dominating Far From Home. And Doctor Strange is important in the first part of the movie, but then he's literally sent off in No Way Home. He's not even in the back half of the film until the last 10 minutes. And so I would strongly disagree with the idea that he's in the shadow of other characters. I think, or I've said it many times, that I want the Spider-Man 4 to not do that anymore. I want him to be able to stand on his own without needing kind of that crutch. But I don't think it's that he's in the shadow. And the idea that he finally feels like Spider-Man over Spider-Boy, I don't think that's a flaw in the system. Spider-Man historically is a high schooler that's a superhero, and then he gets older, and like Daily Bugle, there's other things to it, but he starts out as Spider-Boy. That's not like a bug in the system. That's not a flaw. Like, what were they thinking? That's a thing that is a part of the Spider-Man lore of when he became Spider-Man. He was Spider-Boy. So I don't have a problem with that. So I would disagree pretty strongly with both things that you're saying there. Jedi Pastor Aaron, dancing Peter in Spider-Man 3 is not bad like everyone says. He's a dork. He has lost all inhibitions. He would do what he thought was cool, so he would probably be lame.
And I did this. We don't really talk about this.
I see what you're saying, that what my son thinks the dance is beautiful, and so he doesn't even feel the need to even give an explanation. He just thinks it's a cool dance. But I think there's a logical way that you can play it out and go like, yeah, I mean, he's a nerdy guy, so what would a nerdy guy do if he wouldn't know what's actually cool, and so he's doing emo hair, he's dancing in the goofiest way fashion, and that doesn't mean it, like, there's the version of it that, like, you can explain it on paper, and does it play right in a movie? Does it play very odd in a movie? And the fact that a bunch of us have been like, what? And he's like, in a club, and he's like, now dig on this. Like, all this weird stuff, the way that they communicate it, execute it, display it on screen, it's odd. It's an odd way to do it that just feels out of place and too exaggerated and too goofy, even if maybe there is some logic to the way that it kind of makes sense as per your explanation. Venom is genuinely a great film that gets overhated due to the universe it's associated with.
Hey, Eddie.
I got two thoughts on this. I think Venom was highly criticized when it came out, and I feel like time has been friendlier to it. But when it came out, it was the first movie in this spumunk, or whatever this thing is called, Sony Spider-Man Universe without Spider-Man. It was the first one. So I don't think you can say it was criticized for what it was associated with, because it was the first one. It was right out of the gate, it was the one. People were evaluating just on it what it was. And as time has passed, they have been friendlier, kinder to the Venom movies, where the reviews for Venom 2 were like twice, the Rotten Tomatoes scores twice that of the first movie, despite the fact that that's not generally the consensus, but reviews got friendlier as people got acclimated to what these Venom movies are trying to do. But so I think the idea that it's only because of the association that people like look down on it, I think that's a little bit of revisionist history, because Venom was the first one, and Venom was most criticized when it first released. So thus, I don't think you can use it's only guilt by association. People are only mean to Venom because of Morbius. No, Venom had a 30% Rotten Tomatoes score when it came out. And then audiences discovered it. Audiences warmed up to it. But So I think the argument you're making is pretty flawed. Tobey Maguire should be the main Spider-Man in the MCU instead of Tom Holland. I would have to know what you're even pitching on that, because like you just have to factor in reality into it, where the deal wasn't made for Spider-Man to join the MCU until 2016. In 2016, Tobey Maguire was 40 years old. Or something like that. Like he's 40. So is your MCU Spider-Man that we're doing here telling stories about him in his 40s? Well, you just pitched something that's entirely different, wholly different from what they did. So you can't do Spider-Man Homecoming and have 40-year-old Tobey Maguire dating, trying to go to homecoming with a high school. So that doesn't work. So like, obviously you're pitching something totally different. And if your idea was like, no, we should have done like, those Raimi films are like, he's too old. There's Tom Holland was the right age in 2016. So do I think, would I want a 40-year-old Spider-Man that's married with kids as our MCU Spider-Man? No, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that's a good exploration of things. So I would have to know what your pitch is for what you, like when you say Tobey Maguire should have been the main Spider-Man in the MCU, what do you mean by that? Like everything is different. Every plot point that they did with Spider-Man in the MCU is different. I mean, he's introduced as like Tony Stark finds this high school kid. Like that doesn't work anymore. None of these plots work if he's Tobey Maguire. So what is your pitch for how this would work and make sense? I don't like the animated Spider-Verse movies.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
The first one had a generic origin story. The second one was too confusing and messy. I'm not a fan of the animation as it looks too choppy and is ugly to look at. It's kind of along the exact same lines in the back half there. I can understand, like, it is choppy. It's intentionally a low frame rate. And some people just aren't going to like that because they like smooth animation, which is what most animation is, this highly smooth 3D computer animated rendering, and stylistically they're choosing to do a lower frame rate that gives it kind of this specific feel and vibe to it that some people won't like. Now on the plot side to it, I think it's true that the first movie does have a fairly straightforward origin story to it, but that's only one element of what's going on in that movie. There's more into the Spider-Verse than just Miles gets bit by a radioactive spider and gains powers and must learn to balance his real life and being a superhero. Like, there's a lot more going on there than just the generic origin story stuff. And I don't have a problem with origin stories. So I can see somewhat where you're saying where it's fairly straightforward. But also I would pretty strongly disagree with the idea that it's just that. As for the second movie being too confusing, I didn't find it confusing. Messy, maybe I could see what you're saying. There is a lot kind of going on there. But at the same time, like when I hear those two together, it's like, I don't like the first one, it's too basic. And then the second one has a few more layers to it. And you go, I don't like the second one, it has too many layers to it. You're like, all right, kind of make up your mind. What do you want with these ones? Is it just your thing? Fair enough. But like, there's got to be something in here that, do you want it basic or do you want complicated? Because it feels like we're criticizing whatever way this thing goes. I've done other videos just like this. You can check them out right over there in that playlist. Also did this one called Hot Takes and Hot Wings, where we talked about your hot takes while eating flaming hot wings. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.